Laios Touden is your average unemployed fudger who creates a party to make it big in the dugout. Yet, his inability to provide food for his party leads to his sister's death. Ultimately, he takes revenge on the monsters by eating their flesh with satisfaction and ventures into the deep to look for evil magic that can revive his sister. Years later, Laios and his team of adventurers enter the deep floors of the dungeon with an empty stomach, only to become a red dragon's appealing snack. Fortunately, Marcille casts a teleportation spell that helps them escape the dungeon. However, the magic fails to teleport Laios' sister, Fallon, from the dragon's tummy. Furthermore, their lockpicker, Chilchuck, brings forth bad news, revealing that 2 of their party members have submitted their resignation. At this point, he tells Marcille and Chilchuck to resign from his party mainly because of their money problems. With no choice left, he decides to venture into the dungeon all by himself after selling his body gear for some cash. Yet, the 2 friends insist that they will accompany him on the journey under any circumstance. After running his horses, Laios suggests that eating monsters from a dungeon can sustain them for long enough. According to him, monsters inside a dungeon are part of an ecosystem which might help them survive. Naturally, Marcille feels the creeps on her skin just by hearing this sort of insane idea. On the first floor of the dungeon, Laios secures their lunch by saving a bunch of worthless noobs from a running mushroom monster. He also overhears the footsteps of a scorpion nearby and decides to add it to the dish as their main source of protein. At the safe point location on the first floor, Laios begins dissecting the monster to cook for lunch, which makes them the center of attention amongst the crowd. Right after, a dwarf named Senshi approaches them to provide some pointers in hope of helping them cook the monster dish. Unexpectedly, he has been researching and gaining experience in the field for more than 10 years. With that knowledge, Senshi prepares them for an extravagant monster dish that looks like something out of Gordon Ramsay's restaurant. The constant praises from Laios and Chilchuck force Marcille to drop her "I am a princess" attitude and eat the damn food. Ultimately, Senshi joins the group, claiming that the red dragon that ate Fallon would make a very delicious hamburger steak. On their journey to the second floor, Laios and Senshi gather more ingredients from monster-eating plants for their second meal of the day. After a few hours, Marcille wakes up with drool dripping from her mouth due to the scent of some amateurs cooking pork and bread. Immediately, Senshi begins to claim that the dipshits are just newbies playing adventures in a dungeon, as they don't even know about eating the right kind of food. He thinks that they need to balance their diet with a lot of meat and eggs to enhance their strength. With this idea in mind, both Laios and Senshi conclude that they need to hunt down a half-snake and half-chicken monster known as Basilisk. Luckily, they also find a bunch of eggs in its nest, which would allow them to intake a lot of protein. Out of nowhere, the mother Basilisk appears and begins fighting the team for stealing her precious eggs. Sometime later, Laios begins acting like his true self in front of the Basilisk, giving Senshi enough time to sneak in behind. An attack from both sides confuses the monster, which allows them to kill it swiftly. Still, one of the other party members somehow gets pointed by the monster and falls to the ground. In the end, Senshi is forced to roast the chicken then and there, with the antidote inside the recipe. A while later, Senshi reminds them that they should stock up on vegetables and supplies. In that moment, Marcille takes the spotlight by providing them with a textbook way of removing the plants. However, Senshi proves to be a smart man, as he just cuts off the plant's head for an instant kill. Despite this, she stubbornly tries to prove that the textbook is always right. In doing so, she provokes a giant bat and gets herself in harm's way for no reason whatsoever. Later, in the deeper levels, Chilchuck masterfully detects and briefly instructs the team on how to avoid them. Still, Senshi ignores all of the instructions and activates various traps, endangering Chilchuck in the process. Furthermore, he stubbornly gets fixated on finding the source of the fire trap, as he thinks that it must have olive oil in the background. In the end, Chilchuck manages to find the olive oil at the source of the trap for a deep-frying adventure. After that weird dinner party, the group ventures into the deeper levels through a secret passage that Chilchuck found. Upon taking a few steps, they reach a room filled with magical armor. Immediately, Laios recalls that he and his sister encountered monsters like them on their first quest. That was when he obtained his first neat sword from one of the knights, and also got killed for the first time. As a matter of fact, in this world, people die in the dungeon all the time and come back alive like a video game. With that said, they decide to run past the magic armor knights without triggering their magical defense mechanisms. However, for some reason, the kings begin surrounding them like a horde of monsters with intelligence. Ultimately, they're left with no choice but to run back with their tails between their legs. Laios can't shake the fact that the armor in the room has been acting weird compared to what he has encountered before. They conclude that the armor was surrounding the other side of the room as if there was some precious treasure on the other side. This time around, Marcel, Chilchuk, and Zenshi throw themselves at the monsters as bait to create an opening for Laios. Surprisingly, he finds another suit of armor inside the room with an extravagant sword and shield. He carefully steals the head of the armor only to discover a parasite-type monster hiding between the layers of the plates. This information allows him to kill the monster with ease and save everyone else outside. Before going deeper, Laios excitedly asks Zenshi to cook the monster with various methods, as tasting new monsters is also an adventure. After taking the first bite, he praises the dish and removes the anxiety of food poisoning from everyone's mind, allowing them to enjoy the dish as well. After venturing into a deeper level where Laios displays his experience in the dungeon by differentiating monsters from their footsteps, a while later, Zenshi takes them to his hideout on the 3rd floor because of some errands. Unexpectedly, he has been living a self-sustained life in the dungeon for God knows how long. He only goes to the surface to restock some supplies that are not available in the dungeon. After a decade in the dungeon, Zenshi reveals that the golems are essential to sustain life inside the dungeon, because their soil can grow various crops. He single-handedly takes on the 3 golems and takes out their magical core one by one. Ultimately, the entire gang helps him harvest all the crops like carrots and cabbages from on the back of the golem. Naturally, Zenshi prepares a bunch of dishes with the newly harvested crop to satisfy the urges of the vegan elf. Upon eating their fill, she mentions that the bathroom layouts on the 3rd floor are well maintained. Later in the hallways, Zenshi reveals himself to be the caretaker of the dungeon, who has been maintaining things like the bathrooms and the golems. Otherwise, the monster of the lower floors would invade the upper floor and drastically change the atmosphere of the dungeon. As the hours pass by, they drop by a restaurant in the dungeon, which houses various criminals and shady characters to trade their leftover vegetables. Out of nowhere, a group of hungry orcs invade the upper floors and kill all the people in the restaurant. They spare Zenshi and the others because of his past relationship with them. However, this time they steal all the food from Zenshi without providing fair compensation or trade. Furthermore, Zenshi offers to become their captive just because the orcs have both flowers and yeast to make the perfect bread. Unexpectedly, Marcel and the leader of the orcs get into a huge argument about their respective histories. During this fight, Zenshi gives them a few pieces of the dough to vent their anger. The leader of the orcs also gives Laios a map of the village that might help him in locating the red dragon. Simultaneously, a relatively young party led by Kabru and Rinsha make a name for themselves on the surface. People assume that they might be the ones to slay the mad mage inside the dungeons and rule the kingdom. However, Kabru always remains silent, as proving things with one's action is more praiseworthy. He buys a bag of supplies for his party of 6 members to hit the deeper levels of the dungeon. Unexpectedly, Kabru finds a treasure chest on one of the floors. Upon opening the chest, he finds a bunch of gold and jewels, which would help the party buy more rations for deeper exploration. Sadly, Laios and his members find their lifeless bodies laying in front of them with a lot of jewelry on the floor. Initially, everyone thinks that they might have killed each other in the greed of money. However, the sword parasite in Laios' sword warns him about an upcoming threat. A few moments later, the team finds out that the gold coins and jewelry are just small bugs with the ability to conceal themselves. Immediately, Marcel creeps out on the side of these bugs and casts a very powerful magic spell to stun them. Zenshi suggests that the bugs have nutrients. he whips up the cooking gear from God knows where to start doing his thing. In the end, they wait for Laios to try out the dish and give the green signal for them to eat it as well. Out of nowhere, a bunch of ghosts begin flying around the corpses of the other team members. Due to Marseille's spell, they begin chasing down Laios and his team through the hallways. At this moment, Laios reminds Marseille that his sister will deal with the ghost thing in no time. However, they're forced to escape because someone on the team is just a total letdown. Ultimately, Zenshi comes up with a plan to make some holy water that will drive the ghosts away in no time. Surprisingly, he just starts adding ingredients from local folklore that are supposedly a weapon against things like ghosts. Due to some fudged-up anime plot armor, the holy water with a bunch of monsters in it kills the ghost with just one hit. On top of that, they manage to freeze the holy water, which transforms into a jelly-like substance for everyone to enjoy. After eating their fill, Zenshi suggests that they should head towards the deeper floors as soon as possible, where the monsters are much more animal-like, unlike the treasure-imitating bugs. In the meantime, Chilchuk carefully deactivates all the traps in their way to create a safe passage for them. Accidentally, Laios stumbles upon a living paint of a lady who tries to suck him inside the fantasy world. Instead of freaking out, he willingly decides to venture into the maintenance, mainly for the juicy grapes the lady is holding. With a rope tied to his waist, he ventures into the living painting, only to be put on serving duty for the king and the queen. The scene of the king naming his firstborn child kills the vibe, leading him to leave without taking a single bite. Naturally, the others are pissed off about the fact that some dumb fudge was only focusing on the queen rather than eating his fill. However, Laios begs for another chance and assures them that the mission won't be compromised. This time around, he arrives on the scene where the king gets poisoned by someone mysterious. The sudden change in the situation forces Laios to grab a variety of food from the buffet and signal the team for an escape. However, for some reason, his hand disappears when the team pulls him out of the painting. On his last try, he manages to eat a bunch of food, but an elf recognizes him from the other painting. In the end, the others pull him out before the elf roasts him for dinner like a basilisk or whatever monster you like. Later that day, Zenshi and the others realize that setting camp on the third floor is their only option left. Luckily, they find a clean source of water alongside a pretty spacious kitchen. The same night, Chilchuk mistakenly triggers a trap and gets himself stuck inside a cage with no one to help. After some time, he notices that a large mimic is coming for his life from the corner of the cage. In the nick of time, Chilchuk solves the puzzle in the cage and opens the door to freedom. In the meantime, the mimic triggers one of the traps and gets himself butchered in an instant. Naturally, both Zenshi and Laios excitingly prepare the lobster look-alike, because why not? Meanwhile, back on the upper part of the third floor, two adventurers heal Kabru and his party in exchange for a lot of gold. They let them believe that another party stole all of them, knowing that more corpses mean more money. On the fourth floor, Laios and the others are forced to cross a lake filled with various monsters. Despite being warned, he stubbornly summons a fish named Anne from the lake and decides to ride it back. The fish tries to eat the damned dwarf at the bottom of the lake, forcing Laios to take action and rescue him. After the fight, Chilchuk and Laios also find Kabru and his group laying uncouthly once again in the lake. Naturally, they take them ashore and steal a bunch of barley from one of their bags as payment. On the other hand, Marseille utilizes the fat from Anne to make soap for his beard. This allows the magic to take its effect on his body, allowing him to walk on the water with chakra control. During their journey across, Marseille indiscriminately begins casting explosion spells and destroys the ecosystem of the lake. As the dungeon's caretaker, Zenshi begins an argument with her, explaining that not everything works by uploading pictures on OnlyFans. Out of nowhere, a giant kraken appears from underneath and makes plans to eat the team for lunch, or whatever the time is. Thankfully, Zenshi takes up arms and kills the beast mainly because of his experience with octopuses and squids. Ultimately, they cook the monster in a bunch of spices to make an extravagant dish. Unexpectedly, Laios somehow gets food poisoning from eating a giant raw parasite in the kraken's body. Until now, I thought his stomach was made of iron, but I guess not. The following morning, Chilchuk suggests that Laios should sleep a little longer, as the pain didn't let him sleep all night. All of a sudden, Marcial starts an unwanted lecture about the creation of the dungeons. This takes her back to the school days, when she met Laios' sister, Falin, for the first time. Weirdly enough, she was always bullied by others for wearing clothes filled with dirt. However, Marcial soon cleared that her magic skills are on a whole other level compared to hers and the rest of the class. From that day onward, they began ditching class and sneaking into the dungeons for their little cute adventures. Unbeknownst to them, Laios overhears the whole story and reveals that Falin used to mention Marcial in her letters quite often. As the conversation draws to an end, Chilchuk predicts that it will take them 2 days to find the dragon. He advises everyone to finish their chores and rest up, as they won't be setting camp anytime soon. Unexpectedly, Marcial turns out to be a hygiene freak on top of being a vegan, and so she boils a ton of water to clean herself from head to toe. As the team prepares for their journey, she pours the extra boiled water back into the lake, only to be attacked by a mass of water spirits known as Undine. The constant attack on the surrounding area forces her to escape into the water. However, this turns out to be the worst possible decision, as Marcial's water-walking spell begins to wear off due to mana depletion. Ultimately, the water spirits attack Marcial in a few vital spots, which inhibits her movement. In the end, she casts a fire spell with all the mana in her body to create an opening for Laios. After rescuing her from the water, he takes all of them and runs like his life depends on it. Out of nowhere, their former party member Namari shows up on the scene with her new employers Tansu Floke and his wife Yarn Floke. They also have 2 black identical twins named Kiki and Kaka. Also, don't ask me how that's possible. As their only hope, Laios asks the scholar to heal Marcial with magic. Yet, Tansu proves to be stingy and demands an upfront payment for the healing. However, Laios and his team have nothing to offer other than a pile of monster meat at their disposal. Eventually, Tansu continues his journey to the lake, as he has a kinship to spirits for the past century. Still, the pissed-off water spirit doesn't listen to any of his pleas and attacks without discriminating. The old dumb fudge uses Namari as a human shield, leading to her death. Upon coming back to the camp, he casts a revival spell on her body to bring her back to life. As it turns out, the ancient spell on the dungeon allows them to revive anyone. After knowing the risk of his research, Tansu agrees to heal Marcial in exchange for both Laios and Zenshi becoming their bodyguards. Following their agreement, Laios and Zenshi help Tansu complete his research on the lower floors, while they deal with the threats like a paralyzing tentacle monster. Upon returning to the campsite, Tansu fulfills his end of the bargain and heals all of Marcial's wounds. However, restoring her mana is a whole other ballgame altogether. With some brainstorming, she suggests that consuming the Undine would help her restore all the mana, since spirits are made of mana. Suddenly, Namari notices that Zenshi used the most powerful ore known as adamantium to forge his plan. Together, the 2 dwarves seal the spirit inside the pot and cook it on a high flame. Instead of chugging it directly, Zenshi suggests that they should cook something with the Undine. Unexpectedly, Marcial goes full into housewife mode and prepares a delicious soup to restore her mana. After enjoying the meal, the 2 parties eventually bid farewell and parted ways. On their way to the 5th floor, Chilchuk warns the others that the wall surrounding them houses God knows how many tentacle monsters. However, pushing through them will be easier rather than finding an alternative route. All of a sudden, a giant frog appears out of the blue and throws Laios' sword in a bottomless pit. As the thing starts attacking the group, Chilchuk notices that the tentacles are not hurting the giant frogs. He tears a part of its skin and wraps it around the hand like a glove, discovering that the tentacles don't sting the frog's skin. Following this, Laios and the others craft a full body suit out of the frog's skin to help them survive on the tentacle road. Back on the surface, Tansu goes to inform the Adventurers Guild to report the fruits of research and details about the orcs' migration. He also learns that the elven race is demanding ownership of the dungeons. Instantly, Tansu realizes that the elves are interested in uncovering the mysteries of the immortal spell inside the dungeon. He thinks that the humans should find it before the elves, because its value far exceeds any amount of gold. Meanwhile, on the 5th floor, Laios and the team follow the map given to them by the orcs, only to discover their settlement is in ruins. They conclude that the dragon is active and on the hunt for food. This new information proves to be a hindrance in their original plan, as fighting a red dragon with their strength is suicide. Eventually, they come up with a plan to distract the beasts and attack it according to their strengths rather than playing into the dragon's hand. Their plan to make a building fall over the dragon and restrict its movement fails miserably after Laios throws away their only shield from the dragon's breath. At this point, they have no choice left but to run for their lives in whatever direction is available. Somehow, they manage to hide in an isolated location, but the parasite in Laios' sword acts up and reveals their location. In an attempt to wound the dragon, Zenshi shatters his axe, which was the only large weapon they had. However, he hands over his knife to Laios, revealing that it's made from metal even rarer than adamantium. The knife allows him to slice through the dragon's scales, but its size makes it ineffective. In the end, both Zenshi and Chilchuk decide to distract the red dragon and allow Laios to escape. Meanwhile, Laios gets together with Marcial in another building and plans to launch an assault on the dragon from the left side. Both of them realize that one mistake at this point will mean permanent death. Luckily, he successfully manages to jump on the dragon and confuse the hell out of him. After getting tossed around like a ball, Laios swiftly strikes the dragon's weak spot and kills it on the spot. A while later, Marcial treats everyone's wounds on the battlefield to begin their search for Fallen. After tearing through the monster's flesh, they shockingly find a bunch of Fallen's bonds mixed with some monster bones in the stomach area. Upon seeing the developing situation, Marcial reveals that her real strength lies in this thing called the forbidden magic of ancient times, or black magic. She uses the dragon meat and her blood as a catalyst to activate a forbidden spell that brings Fallen back to life. Later in the bath, she informs Marcial about some kind of power brimming inside her body, indicating that the dragon meat enhanced her magic quite a bit. Still, Marcial forbids her from using mana for a few days. A while later, Fallen displays the sheer amount of her power by saving Zenshi and the others from the exploding dragon's body. However, none of them pay any heed to this, as they're glad that Fallen is back with them. Ultimately, Laios tightly hugs her and makes her promise that this kind of thing won't happen again. Well, that was all the food I could watch in a day, and just so you know, I'm fasting. So you better leave a comment and subscribe to the channel for more content.